Hello, everyone! Welcome to the Classic of Mountains and Seas Visualization of Whale Twins Series tutorial. Today is the first lesson of the tutorial. So let's first take a look at what the Golden Palace is. First, the Golden Palace is built into the wing's engine, a three-dimensional scene building and rendering component. Let's take a look. When we click on it, this is a project where I have placed a project with the Whale Twin component. When I click on Whale Twins, we can see on the left, in the dashboard layer, there is a component called Whale Twins. Okay, it includes many functions, including Model Import, GIS Access, Model Library, Rendering Effects, and so on. I will introduce them to you gradually later. Let's first look at the simplest, the entire Whale Twin editing. We can double-click to enter the editing. The left side will switch to ours. Component bars, we can see when we are in the two-dimensional component. We can insert charts here. We select the net stretching component and double-click. The component listed here becomes a 3D component. We can see there are many component libraries here, including architectural models, decorations, and sacrifices, sacrificial libraries, and built-in libraries. This is the component of Whale Twins. It is built into the entire wing's engine. Visualization software. You don't need to download it separately. After downloading the entire wing's engine, you can have this Whale Twin. So how do we create the entire? A project of Whale Twins? Currently, there are two forms. The first one is to go back to the home page after opening it, and open the visualization of the Book of Mountains and Seas, and it will show this interface. We click on News. We can see here there are 5 kinds of projects. Many of these projects are created by this Whale Twin component. First, the most important one is the 3D digital twin. All the projects in the middle are created by the Spasmodic Life project, created by the Spasmodic component. Generally speaking, you can. If you don't need any content, you can choose these empty projects. If you need a basic base, you can choose the building, the base A or base B. These two. The difference between these two bases is that A is performance-oriented. Then for some, such as a GPU that is integrated graphics, it is recommended. If the GPU is relatively good, such as around 2600, then the visual priority base can be recommended. Of course, this visual priority does not all visual effects are turned on. If it's like AGP, you like 3070 or 3080, it is recommended that you enter this. After creating it with this base, Then turn on all advanced visual effects. This is our first way to create genuine hole. Of course, because Whale Twins has built-in timing systems. After creating the project on the timer side, it is also made with the Whale Twin component, the 3-dimensional map in the map. It is also made by Jinglinging components. So the Whale Twin component is actually in the entire visualization of the classic of mountains and seas, responsible for 3D rendering. Another way. Suppose you already have a project. Let me create an empty project. I already have a project. I want to insert the Jinglinging component. It is also possible. We click on the Whale Twin in the left sidebar. You can see this empty scene or sacrifice, or a sacrificial base. Both of them are spasmodic bodies. We click on the empty scene, and it will automatically insert a Whale Twin component. Okay, so actually in a project, we can insert multiple Whale Twin components. Okay, we can move it like this. We can shrink it. Okay, let's say I need to insert multiple. I click here again. I'll insert another one. And move it. Of course, generally speaking, we don't recommend inserting multiple. To insert multiple Jinglinging components, because the spasm is relatively consume hardware resources, especially GPU resources. So if there are too many, the whole project will be very laggy. Okay, let's delete this Whale Twin now. It's too bad. So whether you are creating a new one or in an existing project, we can insert Whale Twins into it. If you want to create from the beginning of creation, to create a 3D project, it is recommended to create a new project. If during the project production process, such as when requirements have been modified and need to do 3D, then you can create a new project and insert the character component. In addition, sometimes during the production process, we may say that our 3D components are placed on the background, and the foreground will switch to various different 2-dimensional charts. At this time, we suggest click on Create Background Board here, and then insert the stretch in the background board. So no matter how many subboards in the foreground, create sub-windows, no matter how many there are, in the process of switching. The spastic component is on the background. In this way, our regular 3D projects, usually the 3D is at the bottom. The upper chart will constantly change. This is also a way. Then we need to put the entire components in the background board. Okay, let's delete it. After talking about how to create the sperm egg laying component, let's show you again what are the characteristics of our static egg laying components. Firstly, our gamification component is a self-developed web-based 3D engine. We did not use any game engines. Let's take a simple look at the curd effect. You can see that it is actually the overall effect is not much different, because we not only simply using some basic Webble interfaces, but also integrated many advanced built into the engine. Now I can show you some simple things. First, those who have used game engines know that game engines have a particularly useful feature, which is the dynamic sky. Because with the dynamic sky, we can switch between day and night. Similarly, we also have this function built in, even without buying a third-party plugin. We first double-click to enter the Whale Twin Component Editor. After double-clicking, it switches here. There will be an exit edit. We just click this to exit the editing. Our entire layer switching. It becomes the internal layer of Jinluan Hall. In the internal layer, the top layer is the scene. Below are sky camera models, vegetation mapping. If you add GISS, there will be GISS and other layers. The most commonly used layers are the scene layer and the sky layer. Other layers are for you to choose and use. Will be used when you choose to use them. Let's take a look at our sky first. We are currently using a static sky, because static sky doesn't consume performance. We can switch to the dynamic sky. You can take a look. After switching to the dynamic sky, we can increase the intensity of lens flares, which is the lens flare intensity. When we are adding new special effects, we should pay attention to the FPS in the lower right corner, which is our frame rate. If the frame rate drops significantly, we don't recommend to turn on new special effects. Note that I am performance-oriented. I'm gradually adding some new effects to it. After adding the dynamic sky, there seems to be no clouds in the sky, and there seems to be nothing special. Let's click on the scene. Let's take a look at the time of day. Let's pull it up. Not only the sun will. After such adjustments, then our entire sky will also be adjusted. This sky is rendered based on the entire. A physically based rendering is based on the basic principle of atmospheric scattering. Rendered based on the basic principle of atmospheric scattering. So it is very realistic. Meanwhile, we can see. Here we turn on a fog effect. This fog effect is in our sky. Hide fog in our sky. This fog is relatively high performance. because it is a simple numerical calculation. We can turn it up a bit. Let's take a look. This fog is actually a simulation of the atmosphere, which imitates the atmosphere. You can see that. When I turn it up, the whole sky becomes larger. If you need a more realistic atmosphere fog, we also provide an atmospheric scattering below. This is based on the entire physics, calculated based on the atmospheric scattering. This one is relatively worse than, is a little worse than our height fog. Let's turn on the air perspective. This effect is based on real physical rendering. When we zoom out, we can see that there is a faint bluish feeling. We push it up, and the fog effect disappears. This fog effect will follow us. The rendering of the entire sky. It can blend in. Okay, after talking about the whole object effect, in our physical effects, besides the height, we also provide secondary objects and a volume object. This will be mentioned in our advanced courses. Of course, the sky cannot be without clouds. We also provide a set of volume cloud renderings. Let's open the cloud. Volume clouds consume relatively more performance, so we provide 3 rendering qualities here, which are low, medium, and high. They correspond to rendering 1/16 of the entire screen, 1/4 of the entire screen, and the original size of the entire screen. Generally speaking, if your performance is not high, it is recommended to choose low. In this way, we can have a relatively acceptable volume cloud effect. Even during the pulling process, you can pull it too. The clouds. You can see the feeling of passing through the clouds. Of course, in the volumetric cloud, we also provide a lot of settings. We will explain it in the cloud course later. In the course of clouds, with the volume cloud, we go back to the scene. Let's switch to a daytime. We can feel such a sense of reality. Of course, you can also see why the ground is very white at night. This is because our project is a performance-oriented project. In order to simulate the entire atmospheric scattering, we turn on the fog in our material effects. We turned on the fog quite large. Meanwhile, the color of the fog, especially the color of the ground. In the atmospheric scattering, the color of the ground is set to black. Generally speaking, we recommend that you set it to black directly. In this way, when the atmospheric scattering is turned on, it will be more realistic. Okay, let's take a look at our night. Well, this is a more realistic night. Of course, in addition to the entire dynamic sky. We also have the entire weather built into the sky, such as rain, snowing. Our weather can even to automatically cover the snow and rain. Let's take a look at the snow cover. When we drag it, the snow will automatically cover the entire, the ground and our trees. Of course, it will automatically skip and skip over the water's surface because there is generally no snow on the water. Okay. In this way, we can see the entire, the sky effect. Of course, we also provide the game engine with a dynamic sky capture, a real-time capture of the dynamic sky. When we capture the dynamic sky in real time, the overall ambient lighting will be more realistic, especially when the sky switches between day and night. There will be more realistic ambient lighting. Okay, now that we've talked about the sky effects, let's talk about the scene. Preset post-processing effects. Post-processing is the entire, a very important part of realistic rendering. In addition to providing common post-processing, such as contrast, saturation, and hue, and so on, we also provide color grading. Our vignettes and our jitters. These are some common post-processing effects. Of course, Wings also provides some advanced post-processing, such as screen space reflection, glow and bloom. You may wonder why there are non-glow and glow, two light halo modes. This is what we provide for different scenes. The glow mode is for our sci-fi rendering mode, while the ambient light is for our realistic rendering mode. What's the difference between these two? We'll talk about our halo effect. We will mention it separately. Meanwhile, we also support ambient occlusion and motion blur. We'll mention these in separate courses. Of course, we also support more advanced settings, which is our automatic exposure mode. We click on exposure, and we can see the exposure mode here. We can choose automatic exposure. After selecting automatic exposure, we can adjust the sunlight in the sky to the real intensity. Because the lumens of sunlight are generally can reach tens of thousands. When I adjusted it to 30,000, the whole picture will look like the same as our naked eyes, and slowly adapt to such a high level. It's a very, very strong sunlight. and after such sunlight. If you switch between outdoor and indoor environments, because the indoors is relatively dark, while outdoors is relatively brighter. In this case, we need to do a dynamic switch. In the dynamic switching of the automatic exposure mode, of course, sometimes we also call it as the eye adaptation mode. Let's switch between day and night. There will be a significant process of eye adaptation. Okay, when we switch to daytime, it will suddenly be very bright. If you want to speed up this particularly bright process, we can speed up and slow down this acceleration. To speed up, the process of eye adaptation will be accelerated. But at the same time, it is worth noting that there is a material that is not supported. We can see the light intensity here, and the marking points here become black. Eye adaptation is not supported by our one-lit material. So after turning on eye adaptation, don't use the one-lit material again. Okay, now that we've finished talking about our first feature, let's talk about our second feature. The second feature of our entire whale twin is that the operation is very simple. Just by dragging, pulling, and using the brush mode, we'll turn off our entire the eye's adaptation. After turning it off, we recommend the sunlight intensity to be around 10. Okay, let's take a look at the simplicity of operation. In fact, in addition to doing the whole rendering effect, we have also made a very user-friendly operation. For example, in our built-in components, we want to add this 19-story residential building. We click on it. It will automatically download it. After downloading, we can use this to plant it in a very convenient way. Place it. We can place it wherever we want. Okay, after I placed it, we can rotate it or move it, including our moving operations. We can not only move along one axis, but also on a plane. These are all very convenient operations. Meanwhile, we can see that for tree vegetation, for such a special model, we may not just plant them one by one. Sometimes, we need to plant them in patches. So we provide two modes. One is the way of planting one by one. We also provide a brush mode. Look, we can use this brush. Click on this brush, and it will paint many trees. Okay. Of course, it's very convenient for us to modify. Or some basic colors, which is very convenient. Let's look at the water. I can double-click to select the entire material of the water. Look at it. I can choose the color of the water here. We can create some, such as murky water or green water, which is all possible. It depends on everyone's requirements. Adjust it yourself. This material setting is also very convenient, even for the metal content of these materials, roughness, or even transparency can be directly adjusted. Let's take a look. Let's say we adjust the transparency of the water. It's okay. Because this water, there is no content under the water. So it's transparent and you can't see anything below. If we change to others, such as the transparency of the ground, it's all possible. Okay, the second one. Our second feature is simple operation. You can use drag and drop or a brush. You can place these models. The third feature is that, because we are self-developed a web engine, so we are not like some game engines. Only supports cloud rendering. We support both end rendering and cloud rendering. We can see that now. This mode, it directly occupies my local GPU. And we can also, when releasing, turn on cloud rendering in advanced settings. When the client accesses, using the GPU rendering resources of the server. Currently, our engine can support. Our engine can support to rendering modes. The end rendering mode is more suitable. And there may be, and many users open it simultaneously, while the client's performance is relatively low. The cloud rendering mode is suitable for server has high performance, and the client's performance is relatively poor. But cloud rendering generally does not, supporting too many clients to open simultaneously, because each customer opening will occupy some of the GPU resources. Generally speaking, if there are more than 8 users, there are few civilian GPS can support this level. Okay, the fourth feature is that we not only support end rendering and cloud rendering, but also CS and BS. This is also a lot of game engines that they cannot support. We can see that we are now operating in operates in the Wings engine software. Suppose we have our own system, and we hope to integrate Wings engine. into our own system. Then we need Wing's engine in the form of a web or in the form of saws to provide such a service. We can also do this with Wing's engine. Let's go back to our home page and find the saws service. There is a saws launch here. Of course, you generally don't have it started. Click to start. After clicking start, it will give you an address. We copy this address and then open it in the browser. I've already opened it here. Let me show you. Okay, we are now completely in the browser. You can see there is an address here. Let's refresh the entire interface. We can see the one we just did. This is what we are operating on. When we click to open it, it will open a new address. Note that at this time, we are all in the browser. Okay. When we open this address, we can see the entire operation is the same as in the client, are exactly the same. We can also change our materials or place our trees, brushes, and so on. All the operations are exactly the same. I can do it here first. I can also adjust the color of the water for you and make it green. Okay. In this way, we can easily integrate the Book of Mountains and Seas, a three-dimensional editor for visualization. Integrate it into your own, into an existing system. For example, I already have a set of our visualization systems. I hope to have a 3D editor. Then we just opened our SARS mode. We can integrate to the system. Okay, this is our fourth feature. And our fifth feature is we have preset a massive amount of materials. Let's take a look. I have shown you before. In our model library, there are building materials. And buildings are divided into many types. We also have transportation tools. Okay, but no. Drones and ships into the entire scene. We have some. We also provide a large number of vegetation effects. We have different kinds of maps. Three-dimensional mapping effects. We also provide some landscapes and some animals. Of course, we are constantly uploading more, including some road models and so on. Meanwhile, we also provide a lot of plotting. What is a drawing? Such as marker points and flying lines, massive labels. That is, when there are a lot of markers. We provide many such drawing tools. Built-in materials. You don't need to change them yourself. And don't need to set it yourself. You can just click on it. Meanwhile, we also have a built-in material library. Let's take a look. For example, this water. You can directly use our and set it up in the material library, and then modify some settings in the material. Of course, there are many materials in it, including some rocks, including common glasses and so on. You can set it according to your needs. To set it, of course, we also have some particle effects now, and record some animations, and some decals, and so on, which you can explore by yourself. We will also in our corresponding courses to give you a detailed introduction. The sixth feature is that we have fully integrated GIS system. You can see that. Generally speaking, the engine, game engine, is a rendering engine. It doesn't support GIS data very well, is not well supported. We have built in the entire GIS. Protocol is built in. Let's click here to take a look. Let's click on Argus here. Okay. When I click on the image, I'm done. The entire sacrificial system is imported into my screen. And this system, we also provide many settings. Whether it is to adjust its own brightness, or editing it. Let's say we have a terrain here. Let me show you. Let's add a terrain of Hangzhou and our own settings here. This is the location of Hangzhou. Of course, if you need a terrain other than Hangzhou, you can use your own. You can use our built-in, other global terrain data, or import some by yourself, or your local terrain. Of course, as you can see, after importing the terrain, this thing will, the model layer we just imported, is pushed down. It doesn't matter. We selected this model and drag it up as a whole. Of course, this is just to drag the model up. We also need to drag other things up. Let's delete the terrain first. We also support tilt photography. And we also support the individualization of tilt photography, tilted photography. Editing, I'll talk about it later. We'll have a separate series to talk about the use of GIS systems. We'll talk about it there. So our GIS system is also fully to use our twin components. This function. The last point is that we can easily interact with our two-dimensional charts. Because when we make digital twin systems, we often encounter the need to. We need to interact between 3 and 2 dimensions. For example, clicking a button in 2 dimensions, and the 3's dimensional cuts a picture. or click a point in the three-dimensional space, a building, or a device. The two-dimensional data will be switched. This is what our entire, the most proficient things of the static and dynamic components. You've just known that. We enter the editing by double-clicking and click Exit Editing to return to our two-dimensional. For example, we can do it in this way. Directly add a two-dimensional component in the scene. And add other two-dimensional components. Of course, we can add our buttons and so on. We can directly enter, synchronously perform a two-dimensional and three-dimensional changes. Of course, we can click this button to add interactions. This button seems to have been added. We click to modify the settings. We can select the component and then specify the component. We can see here. We can find our mirror god and find all the settings inside. That means I can set all settings. For example, I want to set the sky. Such as the number of clouds. The proportion of clouds. Let's assume we set it to be very large. We can turn on the interpolation. We can also set the form of the ring animal. We won't demonstrate it here. We click OK. Okay, now we can take a look. When I click on this, we can see a very simple two-dimensional and three-dimensional. After we click the button, the whole sky will be covered with dark clouds. If you need to make it really cloudy, there are some other settings to set to make the scene more realistic. Of course, we can do the same operation. After we double-click to enter the editing, we come to this instance, which is this building. We can do the same thing as before. Click Add Interaction. The trigger is clicked. We can switch the peripherals, the states of two-dimensional components. For example, we can modify settings. We select the two-dimensional component, such as the button we just selected. We can even change its color and font. Let's change its font. This may not be clear. Okay, I won't give you a specific demonstration here. The whole demonstration. We will explain in the later specifics. In the later specific projects. Today's class has given you. I've given you a preliminary introduction to the overview and some core functions of the Jin launching components. From the next section, we will introduce to you in the main section How to use the whale twin component too. To create a digital twin project. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you all.